it impacts actually on 100% of a workplace.
Welcome to the Lunch at Work podcast, where we talk to experts about how to make workplaces better.
It's lovely to have you on here, Tracey, for the Lunch at Work podcast. Can I ask you just to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you?
Amazing to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a menopause expert. I've essentially been an occupational therapist for 32 years. And then because of my own perimenopause 8 years ago, I had to go on a journey of discovery and try and find things that actually help my own health and wellness. And so I went on to train in those things that actually helped me. And then that just created a passion for me wanting to help other women in the same situation. So I set up my own business in the midst of my own menopause journey and created Moth TLC. And that's why I'm here today.
Who do you specifically help?
Women transitioning through the menopause period of their lives. And, you know, most women will experience perimenopause maybe around the ages of 45 to 55. Menopause happens at around the age of 51 on average. But for some women, that transition can start earlier. And so essentially, I work with women to help them navigate holistically their health and their well-being. So we look at lifestyle modifications and how they're managing in the workplace. So I can work either with individuals or with organisations directly, providing education and support. Women need more than just education. Education is just the start of their requirements.
If we were to briefly just talk about the education piece, and I really want to go on to talk a little bit more how employers can really support women going through the menopause and what women can actually do in order to even support themselves going through it. What sort of symptoms are quite common within the menopause?
Every woman is different. Every woman is unique. The time that they start their menopause or their perimenopause, which is that time preceding menopause. And if I can just clarify that menopause actually as a term just means that a woman has gone 12 months without a menstrual period. So menopause technically lasts for one day. And then you step into postmenopause. Perimenopause really is the time when a lot of those symptoms start to arise, and they can be a mixture of things. And that's because we have hormone receptors all over our bodies. We can split symptoms into three categories. So we've got physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, and somatic symptoms. They can range from anything like migraines, aches and pains, joint problems, might be itching skin. You might find that actually allergies start to increase, and that seems really odd. Depression, anxiety, loss of confidence, loss of sense of self. And then the somatic symptoms are things like pain and how you are experiencing things within your body.
Interesting. You mentioned about confidence. I want to touch on that, just simply because women in the workplace, you're a dynamic individual at the top of your game, menopause hits, and you recognise that within yourself when your confidence decreases. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that can really impact not only the individual, but the workplace?
It doesn't necessarily hit either. It builds. You might start off actually with some very sort of low level symptoms that actually you're not really aware of, and you just try and brush them off and you don't understand why they're happening. Over time, they can get worse. It's the fluctuation in those hormones that actually start to contribute to the changes in how we feel and in our confidence and in our perception of ourselves. We feel less resilient. We actually struggle to manage stress in the same way that we did. And that's because of the impact of progesterone, which is a lovely calming hormone. So if we haven't got enough of that within our bodies, then actually we're just not going to feel right. We're not going to sleep well. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not feeling quite right within yourself, you're feeling a bit more reactive, you're feeling a bit more angry, you're feeling frustrated, that's going to start to really impact on your performance at work and how you're actually relating to your colleagues as well.
What advice would you give to a woman who is experiencing that and all of the other symptoms surrounding that?
To start with, I'd recommend actually that they start to track their cycle and track their symptoms, because that will start to give them some insight into whether or not there's a pattern to what's happening to them. So they might start to see that their periods are starting to change, that maybe the cycle is becoming shorter and heavier. Tuning into their bodies, making a note of how are they feeling at particular times in their cycle, how is that impacting them when they're at work, when they're at home. So there's actually an assessment tool called the Green Climacteric Scale, and it's basically a point system that helps a woman to track some of the main symptoms of menopause. So that can be really helpful just as a baseline to start to increase your awareness and understanding around what's happening.
Let's say I'm a manager and I have a lady who is experiencing, or someone who's experiencing those symptoms. What would you suggest the best way to support that individual?
It's really tricky to get the balance right, I think, as a manager, isn't it? You may have an awareness that there's something that isn't quite right, but you may not necessarily feel that you've got the tools to fix it. So I always suggest coming at this situation with curiosity, asking questions of your staff members, providing a space that's safe and facilitates an open dialogue. A woman herself might not even know that actually what she's experiencing is menopause in those early stages, because the symptoms don't necessarily seem to all make sense and they don't add up. I think as a manager, if you're able to actually be open and honest with someone, that you recognise that, you know, they haven't been quite themselves, would they like to talk about it? So it's about just opening the door to discussion. So I like to talk about the 3 C's. So we've got curiosity, which we've just talked about, then obviously communication, which is really key, and then compassion. Actually just giving some understanding. Women don't necessarily want to be given the solutions, but they need help to understand maybe what might be happening, and then compassion to actually find the solutions within their workplace to make things better for them.
That simple process that you've just explained and really opening up those conversations can keep really key individuals in your business.
Yeah.
I know you had some statistics around this.
Yeah, 1 in 6 women will leave employment because of difficulties with their menopause. That's a massive, massive cost to a workplace. Oxford Economics provided some statistics around the cost to an employer. So if a member of staff is earning £25,000 a year and they leave in relation to their menopause because they're really struggling, that's going to cost that employer £30,500 to replace them. That's massive, isn't it? You know, and you think that's actually quite a low level of pay relatively, you know, in terms of averages. You know, if we think about people working in the city, you know, then their average wage is going to be higher than that. So making some quite simple tweaks in terms of being open and available and compassionate to people could make such a significant improvement in being able to retain key staff.
And that individual could be absolutely brilliant at their job. It's just taking that time out with them, to talk to them, to establish what is going on and what support can be put in place potentially, could make a huge difference. And I suppose if we're looking financially, a huge saving as well.
Yeah.
But most importantly, we've supported someone on that journey, which I think is absolutely key.
It is. And there are a lot of women who actually have expressed that they would have more likely to have stayed in their employment if they had been supported by their employer. The age group of women, so 50 to 64, are the largest economic growth area in terms of employability. Then employers have got to look after women of that age group, because they bring so much wisdom and knowledge and experience to the table. And if they lose that, they're losing gold, aren't they?
You know, you're talking about 50% of the population or thereabouts as well,
absolutely,
of women who obviously not necessarily going through the perimenopause, but will potentially eventually go through it.
Absolutely. Everyone will go through it. And obviously we also need to bear in mind that it isn't just women. There are non-binary folk who will also experience menopause, and transgender people too. But one thing that I always bang on about at home is that, because we obviously talk about menopause a lot, is that it doesn't just impact on women. It impacts actually on 100% of a workplace, because every man, every non-binary person, transgender person, all have someone within their lives or within their workplace that will be impacted by menopause at some time. And so that impacts on working relationships. It impacts on relationships at home, how people actually are able to turn up to their workplace, depending on what they've had to cope with at home, if they have a partner who is really struggling as well, or a mother. Or
reinforces the importance of the knowledge and discussion around menopause, and making it a conversation piece that's non-taboo.
I mean, that's essentially, what I'm really trying to do is break down the taboos and create an open, honest and, informed discussion. And, the more that we talk about these things, then the easier it will get.
Rather than actually focusing on a manager per se, what can the wider part of the business do in order to support the conversation of menopause, in order to support that dialogue and really kind of eradicating that taboo around it?
It would be amazing, wouldn't it, if we could eradicate it?
I mean, that's a really strong word, isn't it?
Well, I think that would be wonderful. I think over time it will get better. Younger generations actually are becoming a little bit more aware, and certainly in terms of menstruation, there is more of a dialogue than there were when, I was a teenager. In terms of employers being able to ensure that menopause actually is part of their equality and diversity strategy, that it becomes part and parcel of their culture, that they obviously have a policy and a procedure for which to deal with, but it's taking it beyond policy, because anyone can have a piece of paper that states how they're going to deal with something. It's also really important to think about what can they actually provide women to help support them to manage their roles flexibly. And so that might be working from home if that's possible, or it might be actually changing their hours. So, if they've had a difficult night, are they able to start work at 10 o'clock in the morning as opposed to 8 o'clock in the morning? If possible, individualised. So actually sitting with a woman and working out directly with them, what do they need to support them through their transition? Because everyone's transition is going to be different. So that might be needing to write a specific risk assessment for that woman, for that individual. So actually strategies are put in place to help them directly, more than it just being a tick box exercise of, we have our policy and we can forget about it. What actually how does that policy then translate into working life? How can we actually create an environment where there is more formal and informal training available, and maybe networking? So there's informal discussion pieces that can actually happen as well, around a cup of tea. Just to try and help with fostering that openness.
I think you've got some really key points there, especially around the network piece and fostering those safe environments. If somebody wasn't confident enough to go to their manager and ask for support, which can often happen, what advice would you give?
It's quite scary stats, actually, that there are 4 in 10 women won't speak to their managers about their menopausal symptoms, and that can happen for a number of reasons. So it might be fear and shame, embarrassment. Maybe they don't feel that their manager is approachable. And there's also a massive fear that actually there could be a loss of progression to their career. So if they aren't confident in speaking directly with their manager, obviously it will depend on the environment where they're working, but obviously everyone will have access to HR. So speaking confidentially to a member of HR would be a good place to start, or whether that organisation has a menopause advocate, someone who is their confidant that they can go and actually ask, questions of, to then be signposted to get the right support for them.
Yeah, I think it's about recognising it and then searching for the right sources to be able to support themselves in that. But I suppose a lot of it comes down to trust, the integrity of the business, would you say?
Absolutely, that's right.
We haven't really touched on HRT. What is HRT?
HRT stands for Hormone Replacement Therapy. It's now been rebranded or renamed as Menopause Replacement Therapy. It's essentially the same thing, they've just given it a different name. So HRT is basically medication that you take to help support your own hormone levels. From an evidence-based perspective, HRT is the first line of treatment for menopausal symptoms. There are some women who can't take HRT because of their medical history, or some women may choose not to take HRT and they would rather try the more holistic, complementary route as an alternative. And I think it's really important to respect women's opinions. HRT is really powerful. There's increasing research actually showing the benefits to HRT, how it can reduce the risks of cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis. HRT definitely has its place, but not all women will want to take it or can take it. So it's being mindful of women's choices. And the other really important thing is that even if you take HRT, you still need to consider lifestyle modifications. You can't expect drink like you did in your 20s and it not to have an effect on your health, wellness, on your sleep, on your bones. Smoking, we know the health impact of smoking, but then the risks of smoking increase massively once you're postmenopausal. So, and exercise is really, really important. So all of the latest research is evidencing that actually the first line of defense, if you like, for bone health is resistance training, and that women should be exercising using weights 2 to 3 times a week, and including also some cardiovascular exercise.
We've covered menopause. I suppose what's also quite important is to see the positives from menopause. And I'd really love you to talk to us a little bit more about that.
It's a transition. And I think that's really important for women to understand that there may be some difficult times, but actually we can emerge out of the other side a bit like, going into a cocoon and coming out of the side a new being. Because what tends to happen is that we become more reflective. We think about what is it that we really want out of our lives. And we do recalibrate, we do get used to the changes in the hormone levels. So it might be a bit of a wobbly time, but we do emerge out of the other side feeling so much more renewed. Like we've got a new sense of purpose. We've got a new sense of who we are. We know where we're going. We become more dynamic in the workplace because actually, we're losing some of those trappings that maybe we had before. And we have wisdom. We are bringing with us all of those years of experience, and actually we can support other women who are following behind us, and we can help bring them through the other side as well.
So it's very much about a frame of mind as well.
Mindset.
Seeing it, instead of seeing it as that negative change, because a lot of people don't necessarily like change. It's quite scary, isn't it?
Change is scary.
It's quite frightening for some people. So I suppose your advice here is what you're saying is embrace that change, recognising that you you're growing into somebody potentially a bit different, but what's coming along with that is your knowledge, your expertise.
I think it's important to give yourself that time. I love to talk about perimenopause as being a chance to pause, to press the pause button, to slow down a little bit, to really go inward, think about what is it that you want to achieve for the next third of your life. Because essentially that's what's on the other side of menopause. We still have another third of our lives to live.
Also knowing that you're not alone in that process, that there is support out there, and probably more so than ever before. Absolutely. I know my mum wouldn't have had the amount of support that she had, and certainly my nan, she definitely didn't either. She just knew that there was change happening. We're going in the right direction.
I think so. We just need to keep having an open dialogue. 1 in 4 women are going to breeze through without any symptoms whatsoever. Yeah, you might be that 1 in 4. Your symptoms might be very mild and you feel that you don't need to have HRT. There may be some women who actually really can't cope, and for whatever reason, HRT is the best thing for them.
When I end up going through the perimenopause, there'll be a part of me where I feel a symptom or see a symptom that I may not relate to menopause or perimenopause and think, oh, it doesn't matter, I don't need help, I don't need support, I can just plough on through. What advice would you give to somebody like me who is fairly resilient and thinks that I can do it all myself?
I would say don't suffer. If, of course, your choice is not to take HRT, that's absolutely fine. If you feel that you can cope with the odd little symptom and it's not bothering you too much, you don't have to suffer. We have got support there. So whether that support is psychological, through talking therapy or coaching, whether it's through medication, and whether it's HRT or non-HRT medication. So there are other medications that are available that can help, for example, with vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. If you are struggling with particular symptoms, it's always a good idea to visit your doctor, to have a blood test done, be assessed. They'll do a full blood count. They'll check your thyroid levels. You can ask them to check your vitamin D levels, vitamin B, iron, ferritin, because those things can also, if you have deficiencies, present with some similarities to menopause symptoms. There can be a crossover also. So, for example, if your thyroid isn't functioning well, that will impact on your reproductive hormones as well. So it's always a good idea to just have a check done.
Thank you so much for today. It's been extremely interesting. I've certainly enjoyed talking to you and learning so much more about menopause. If anybody needed to find you, where would they look?
So you can find me at mosstlc.co.uk. All of my contact details are on there, social media links. If you want to connect with me on social media, on the website, you can actually find a downloadable checklist, which is the essential checklist for employers. So that will just help you to actually think about the things that you should have in place or potentially could put in place to support your employees. And there's also a downloadable green climacteric scale for individuals that want to actually start to track the symptoms of their menopause.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been amazing. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is powered by BM Caterers. Contacting BM is the easiest way to start your journey to a better workplace experience. Click the link in the description for more info.